fleet managers looking for ways to minimize fuel costs? Even small gains can lead to significant savings. Download our fuel savings strategy guide today for 80 actionable tips to boost your fleet's fuel economy.
Is Tesla's full self-driving technology ready for trucking's prime time? Or are software instability, hardware limits, and real-world conditions keeping true autonomy just out of reach? Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Jason Cannon, and my co-host on the other side, as always, is Matt Cole. Tesla Semi is just about to enter commercial production, but the company's CEO, Elon Musk, already has his sights set on something bigger: full self-driving technology, which he hopes to deploy, quote, probably around the end of this year or early next year, end quote, to his company's heaviest vehicles.
Testing teams have been evaluating autonomous technology for major automotive manufacturers for decades, providing an independent, unfiltered assessment of how products perform in the real world. Across well over 1,000 miles of testing FSD across various iterations, the reality of where this technology stands is becoming much clearer.
Everything we do is an honest, unfiltered assessment. If we didn't give that kind of result back to our clients, our work would have no value to them. So everything we do is real world and from the perspective of the end user. So, there, as I think you're kind of intimating, there are many ways you could set up a study like this. But the way we try to set it up all the time is just looking cleanly at the product, either in a vacuum, it's not comparing to something else, or specific to the experience of that singular product, and give an accurate assessment of where the technology's at. So we spent, more than 1,000 miles, well over 1,000 miles with various types of and iterations of FSD in all kinds of circumstances. So we know the technology very well.
Level 5 autonomy remains the ultimate goal. That's autonomy anywhere, anytime. While most developers are trying to achieve level 4 within geo-fenced or restricted areas, very few of the current technologies on the market are perfect, and some aren't even close. As those systems scale to real-world driving across millions of miles, the bar for safety goes up, unmasking potential failure points and major questions surrounding legal liabilities.
There's still a long way to go, and the bar, as always, when you start with these technologies that seem to be so fascinating in the beginning, the bar is relatively low because you're just astonished that it can do this at all. But then when you try to apply it to the real world and think about, over 1 million miles and all the possible things that happen to a driver in 1 million miles, and you start and the possibility for some sort of lethal interaction or even non-lethal interaction. You start to think about how it could change lives and what that could mean. Whose responsibility would it be? And, where's that all going to go?
Tesla's FSD has made significant strides in fair weather conditions, but there remains a noticeable disconnect between consumer-facing versions and dedicated Robotaxi test fleets. Software running on public vehicles often appears more stable than Robotaxi test units, which continue to make unexpected errors and struggle in complex operational environments.
I think there are two things you have to immediately say about FSD. One is it's not clear if FSD supervised as applied to like a Model 3 or a Model Y hardware 4 car. There are different levels of hardware in Tesla vehicles that have to do with the total compute available to service FSD. FSD has come a long way for sure. This last iteration that we've tested, and FSD is camera only, which is the big differentiator, right? What I was going to say is FSD as it is in the vehicles that they're selling to the public and FSD supervised versions, it's not clear if that's the same as what's in the Robotaxi. The taxis seem to make, at this point, mistakes that the FSD cars don't make, which is a rather strange turn of events, inexplicable turn of events. This latest version of FSD that we've tested is so good in fair weather situations and has fixed so many of the operational issues that we've uncovered in previous versions and, over 3 years of testing that it's quite remarkable. So the immediate question is, why is the Robotaxi not that good? And why are they doing things like, reducing their robotaxi fleets at a moment when they should be accumulating more miles, accumulating a larger knowledge base? Tesla's very good at accumulating the data from all the vehicles that are running FSD and bringing that back to, their home data center and using it as the learnings for the next generation of the system. So that is the first big question mark, is what they're showing as really, or where they're putting their hopes is on real autonomous operation in the robotaxi part of it. Why does that software, hardware, seem to be inferior to what they currently have, as FSD supervised for client vehicles? But you have to say that what they've accomplished so far in the camera-only system is quite remarkable. Now, would I trust it as much as I would trust a Waymo, having spent a lot of time in both of those? I don't think I would. No, I wouldn't really want to be in a Tesla FSD supervised car with no one sitting in the driver's seat. But, every software iteration that comes from this last one and into the future is going to further increase confidence that, well, maybe it is as good. We just have to see. One of the other things that we've noted in the past is that with every subsequent iteration of FSD software is typically a one step forward, two steps back sort of process where even sometimes old problems resurface. Things that maybe 3 versions ago were solved now because they've cut some programming tree or they've changed some reasoning kernel inside the software, all of a sudden reappears or appears in a different way. And you will really only unmask those issues through many, many, many miles of testing. And so that's what we're doing. We're on it, every day, filming in the car all the time, trying to create these scenarios. You cannot really create them in a proving ground setting. The chaos of actual driving brings unlimited potential for failure. And so that's really what you have to kind of rely upon.
For instance, the last one we were driving, we just, was doing everything perfectly, and then it just suddenly pulled over to the side of the road for absolutely no reason.
That is not something I would have considered, a safety-related issue, because it pulled over safely. It didn't endanger anyone in the car with what it did. In the past, we've had these kind of, disengagements happen when it seemed like the compute capability was, I would say, under attack by the number of calculations that it was making.
In dense urban settings, heavy real-time calculations can overwhelm the compute buffer, occasionally causing the system to disengage or pull over simply to clear its cache.
There are certain scenarios that require more compute. If it's just on the freeway and there's not a lot of traffic around it, it's not overly taxed by the situation around it. But if you're in an urban setting where all kinds of things are happening to it for an extended period of time, and you're using up the compute buffer, at a certain point, it could run out of compute. Now, this is, I don't know. We're not looking at the compute level. We have no way of seeing exactly how it's thinking or how much it's taxed in a given scenario. But we have noted, as we've watched it act and work, that occasionally in those circumstances where it is just overheating itself through what it has to think about over, let's say, the last 15 minutes, that sometimes it would give up and you might get a, you need to take control command come up for no apparent reason. But we're just positing that maybe it has just run out of compute power and needs to clear its cache so that it can kind of shake its head and say, okay, I'm recentered now. We can move forward.
Well, Musk has acknowledged that with the whole difference between the 4 hardware and the 3, where the people he sold FSD to on the subscription with the level 3, it will not get the level. It cannot cope with the complexity of the current generation of software. So he's talking about all sorts of weird things, but he's pushing it out and pushing it out because it's a huge, huge issue. They've
got a huge legal issue coming up.
Well, it's a beauty. Yeah, it's a beauty.
Yeah.
And he's got millions of cars and he doesn't have a solution to what he promised.
Right. So, I think one of the things you could say is that they're preparing hardware 5. I believe the dedicated robotaxis run this new computer, this hardware 5 computer, which obviously has much more capacity. This latest software, 14.3.4, is the first time we've had real evidence that hardware 4 in those later but existing cars may be sufficient to actually run this software and deal with it. Part of their software development process has been how to create the code so that it reduces the demand on the hardware. And it seems like they may have finally made significant strides in that area. Now, as we talked about in the press release you may have seen, and we have only tested it in fair weather. So this is like a three-dimensional chess game. Not only do you have to worry about, sensor clearing and all that stuff, but when you add differing friction coefficients of the pavement and all that stuff that are going to happen in different weather situations, in addition to, the visibility limitations that the system as a camera-only system is going to have, it's going to go from, just a regular chessboard to a three-dimensional chessboard. And, does even the hardware 5 car have the compute capability to handle that? That's a total unknown. I think we would posit probably not, because we've seen that, it's only now has hardware 4 been able to handle just the fair weather demands of semi-autonomous driving without big errors.
Some of the European states where they've presented their Tesla's presented their data they've been rejected because they claim that they don't have sufficient data to prove that it is safe in anything but perfect conditions. And in fact, they're not even accepting some of the data that's being presented for the perfect conditions they have. So there's some real issues there. Plus the navigation thing, which we've had trouble with navigation, finding places with it all along. That hasn't changed.
Yeah, Tesla's navigation is not good, and you don't really have a complete system if you can't ask it to navigate to a specific spot, right? So that's a big issue.
Speed and environment add another layer of complexity. As vehicle speeds increase, the software needs significantly more compute power and streamlined coding to react in real time. This is why systems like Waymo or Mercedes apply strict speed or freeway restrictions to maintain operational safety.
I think applicable to trucking and what you're interested in is, another level of that chessboard is speed. Because, the faster you're throwing these issues at the system, the more compute capability you need. I don't think it's a coincidence that, Mercedes-Benz system in Europe that, works level 4 semi-autonomously, but you're there to take over, but you can look away. It's permitted to look away, but it only operates at up to, I think, 75 kilometers per hour. And, Waymo has put similar limitations on its system by having it not operate continuously on the freeways. They lifted that restriction on the system for a short period of time and then put it back on when they had those issues with construction zones and things. And those restrictions have yet to, again, be lifted. But the faster you throw the problems at the system and the faster the traffic is moving, the more compute, more streamlined software coding you need to deal with the rapidity of those situations occurring. Obviously, the system has been trained in California signage, California roads. We did a lot of testing on the East Coast and in New York City, particularly where even the fonts on signs, the size of signs, the roads are older, they're totally unregulated, and how that signage is applied and shown on roads. And many times FSD just had incredible problems digesting it or wouldn't digest it. No right turn on red cards in New York City, where most of the time it's not allowed anyway. But pedestrian guarding signs tend to be very tiny on poles. And FSD totally ignores them because it hasn't trained there. Doesn't even know to look for them. So it's very complex, this issue.
Bringing Tesla's technology to Class 8 heavy trucks multiplies the computing demands exponentially due to the vehicle's weight, the braking distance, and the vehicle's articulation. And despite impressive performance in ideal weather, these platforms remain classified as Level 2 driver assist systems requiring continuous human supervision, leaving a wide gap before true driverless operation becomes a reality because a system's capability isn't necessarily a reflection of its safety.
Well, when you say is it capable, that's the tough part of the question, because there's a lot loaded into that question. Most of what is loaded into it is it safe? So there's a sliding scale there. Would I rather have someone not operating a car at this point with what we just saw Would I feel more comfortable having FSD drive a car someplace than someone who was drop dead drunk? Yes, that would be better. But than a normal person who could take control, I mean, you still do need to be there, absolutely, because the system can occasionally make errors. And if it hasn't done it yet, it's just because you haven't driven enough miles. And that's part of the, confirmation bias that we're talking about. The problem is that we have such, as a generation or, as a people now, our brains have not been acclimated to understand how technology works. Very few people have done any kind of computer programming at all in their base education. So technology has just appeared as this miracle that they don't know how it works. They don't care how it works. They just see that it works. They pick up their phone. They don't know how the connection works. They don't know how Wi-Fi works. They don't know any of those things. And they just see that it works, and so they trust it. And that dangerous sort of precedent is preloaded into most people's evaluation of FSD. So I have no experience driving an 18-wheeler. So aside from the obvious mass and braking distance and articulation issues, right, of driving a vehicle like that, none of that is programmed into FSD as it currently sits. The one thing I can say that would be helpful to FSD would be obviously the eye point of a camera on a cab compared to a car. So one of the advantages that it would have in that scenario is a much broader field of view and, a longer range point of view. So if it has the compute ability, and I'm just positing here because obviously we're just shooting from the hip completely, but it would have the view, and if it had the compute capability to take in the complexity of that view, it should give it a longer range view on what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 seconds that it has from the street level view in a passenger car. That I could imagine would be an advantage. But there are all of the huge considerations of operating a vehicle of that, an articulated vehicle of that weight, differential braking, all the stuff that can be used, those tools that can be used and applied that obviously, they may be developing as a part of the semi-program, and I'm sure they probably are. So I don't think their intention would be to just take something like 1434 and all of a sudden transplant it into a cab. I would think that'd be suicide, but I would imagine that they have a team of engineers that are parallel to the FSD program that are working on solving those issues.
Yeah, but they don't have the millions and millions of miles of experience on a semi that they've got with passenger cars. They're starting at a much lower base. And they've got a very steep learning curve.
That's it for this week's 1044. You can read more on ccjdigital.com. While you're there, sign up for our newsletter and stay up to date on the latest in trucking industry news and trends. If you have any questions or feedback, please let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you can catch us again next week.